I thought the worst day of my life was when that office door swung open and the CEO threw a termination letter in my face with a cold smile just 48 hours before my $115,000 bonus was due. But he had no idea that 3 simple emails from me would turn his entire $350 million deal into ashes. Sometimes the most devastating revenge doesn't come with screaming or threats. It comes with the quiet click of a send button at exactly the right moment. My name is Natalie Brooks, and for 15 years, I bled code and sweat into every circuit board that made Iron Veil Technologies what it is today. 38 years old, divorced, no kids. The company was my family, my purpose, my entire world. That Tuesday morning started like any other. I arrived at 7:30 a.m. sharp, coffee in hand, ready to tackle the final security protocols for our biggest client presentation ever. The new CEO, Victor Langford, had been with us for only 6 months. Young, arrogant, with that particular brand of confidence that comes from failing upward through daddy's connections. He'd swept in after our founder Harold Kane's sudden death from a heart attack, promising to revolutionize and synergize our operations with his MBA buzzwords and PowerPoint presentations that said nothing in 50 slides. I was reviewing encryption algorithms when his assistant knocked. "Mr. Langford wants to see you immediately." The executive floor always felt different, too quiet, too polished, like a museum where real work went to die. Victor's office reeked of expensive cologne and fresh leather. He didn't even look up from his phone when I entered. "Sit," he commanded, still scrolling through whatever was more important than basic human courtesy. 5 minutes passed. I watched him perform his little power play, knowing exactly what he was doing. Men like Victor feed on making others feel small. Finally, he set down his phone with theatrical precision and slid a manila folder across his massive oak desk. "Effective immediately. Your services are no longer required at Iron Veil." The words hit like ice water. I opened the folder, standard termination paperwork, already signed and dated. 2 days. 2 fucking days before my annual performance bonus of $115,000 was scheduled to hit my account. "You're joking," I said, my voice steadier than my hands. "I don't joke about business, Natalie." He leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled like some villain from a bad movie. "The company is moving in a new direction. Your skill set is outdated." Outdated, the woman who built their entire cryptographic infrastructure from scratch, who spent countless nights debugging systems that now protected Pentagon contractors and Fortune 500 banks. Outdated. "This is about the bonus," I stated, not a question. His smile was all teeth, no warmth. "That's a serious accusation. I'd be careful about defamation if I were you. Sign the papers, clear your desk, and security will escort you out within the hour." I wanted to throw the folder in his face, tell him exactly what would happen to his precious systems without me. But 15 years in corporate warfare had taught me something valuable. The loudest person in the room is rarely the most dangerous. "Fine," I said, picking up his Mont Blanc pen. Of course he had a $2,000 pen, and signing my name with deliberate care. "I assume my personal effects will be boxed." "Already done. Security has them at the front desk." He was already back on his phone, dismissing me like yesterday's trash. I stood, straightened my blazer, and walked to the door. Just before leaving, I turned back. "Victor, you might want to double-check the intellectual property clauses in my original employment contract, the one Harold personally drafted." His fingers paused on the screen for just a second. Then the arrogance returned. "Goodbye, Natalie." The walk to the elevator felt surreal. 15 years of 6 a.m. arrivals and 11 p.m. departures. 15 years of solving impossible problems and saving the company from catastrophic breaches. Gone in a 10-minute meeting with a man who couldn't write a line of code if his trust fund depended on it. Security was waiting 2 guards I'd shared coffee with every morning for a decade, now looking anywhere but at my face. The box on the front desk was pathetically small. A few personal photos, my favorite mug, the stress ball shaped like a server that Harold had given me as a joke during my first system crash. "I'm sorry, Natalie," whispered Tom, the older guard. "This isn't right." I patted his shoulder. "It's not your fault." As I walked through those glass doors for the last time, phone buzzing with shocked messages from colleagues just hearing the news, I felt something shift inside me. Not anger that would come later, not even sadness. It was clarity, cold and perfect as winter starlight. Victor Langford thought he'd won, thought he'd saved the company $115,000 and gotten rid of someone who might challenge his authority. But men like Victor never read the fine print. They're too busy playing king to notice the ground shifting beneath their throne. My car was parked in the same spot it had occupied for 5 years. I set the box in the passenger seat, pulled out my personal laptop, and opened a file I'd hoped never to need. Harold's original contract, every clause highlighted and annotated. There it was, buried in subsection 8. Paragraph 4. In the event that annual performance bonuses are withheld, delayed, or terminated without documented cause, all intellectual property rights developed by the employee shall revert to said employee after a 48-hour grace period. 48 hours. Victor had just started the clock on his own destruction, and he didn't even know it. The invisible legacy I'd built at Iron Vale wasn't just code. It was the DNA of the entire company. Sitting in my home office, surrounded by whiteboards still covered with algorithmic equations from my weekend work, I pulled up the master architecture documentation only I had maintained. Every system, every protocol, every line of mission-critical code bore my fingerprints. The cryptographic framework alone had taken 3 years to perfect. I'd invented a proprietary encryption method that made our systems virtually unhackable, combining quantum-resistant algorithms with adaptive neural network authentication. The Department of Defense loved it so much, they'd contracted us for 17 different projects. Banks from New York to Hong Kong ran their transaction security through my protocols. And the beautiful irony, I'd named the core system Harold, after our late founder. Harold Kane had been more than a boss. He was a mentor who understood that real breakthroughs came from trust and respect. When I joined Iron Vale as a junior developer fresh from MIT, with ambition outweighing experience, he recognized something in me. He gave me challenges that felt impossible, knowing I'd push myself to the limit to solve them. And when I did, he made sure the recognition followed. Never let them own your mind. Natalie, he'd told me over whiskey in his office one late evening, after we'd successfully defended against a massive cyber attack. Your ideas, your innovations, they're yours. That's why I'm putting this clause in your contract. Consider it insurance against future stupidity. He'd been battling cancer then, though none of us knew. The contract modification had seemed like another one of Harold's eccentricities. He was famous for his detailed legal preparations. Now, 2 years after his death, I understood he'd been protecting me from exactly this scenario. I opened my development logs. 15 years of meticulous documentation. Every breakthrough, every innovation, every late-night epiphany was recorded with timestamps and detailed notes. The pattern recognition algorithm that increased our threat detection by 300%, created at 2:45 a.m. on a Sunday while debugging a client crisis. The self-healing network protocol that had saved Iron Vale millions in downtime, born from a fever dream during a bout of flu when I'd worked from home for a week straight. But the crown jewel was the integration framework for the Stratagem Corp deal. 6 months ago, when rumors of the acquisition first surfaced, I'd spent 2 months building a seamless bridge between our systems and theirs. It was elegant, sophisticated, and completely irreplaceable. The code was so complex, so specifically tailored to both architectures, that rebuilding it from scratch would take a team of developers at least a year if they could even understand the logic flow. I'd documented everything internally, of course, but the master keys, the essential components that made it all work, lived in my head and my personal development environment. It wasn't sabotage. It was standard practice for senior developers to maintain control over their most sensitive work. Harold had insisted on it. Actually, never give them everything, Natalie. Always keep an ace. The email from legal arrived at 6:20 p.m., standard corporate threatening about confidentiality and non-compete clauses. I laughed, actually laughed. Reading their attempts to intimidate me, they had no idea what they'd just done. The intellectual property clause in my contract wasn't just about code ownership, it was retroactive. Every single innovation I'd created would transfer to me if they violated the bonus terms. My phone rang. Jennifer Martinez, head of engineering. My former direct report, and one of the few people at Iron Vale who understood a fraction of what I'd built. Natalie, what the hell happened? Victor just announced you're gone, and now he's demanding all your passwords and documentation. He fired me. Jen, 2 days before my bonus. Silence, then. Jesus Christ, does he know about the clause? I mentioned it. He didn't care. Natalie, the stratagem integration demo is in 3 days. Without you? I know. Would you help us transition maybe as a consultant? I looked at the countdown timer I'd set on my second monitor, 41 hours. 17 minutes remaining. I'm afraid that won't be possible. Jen, my obligations to Ironvale ended the moment Victor signed that termination. You might want to review the technical requirements stratagem specified for the deal, particularly the section about key personnel. Oh my God. Her voice dropped to a whisper. You're listed as essential technical staff, non-replaceable during integration. Interesting how Victor missed that detail, isn't it? Natalie, this could destroy the company. I thought about my 15 years of 70-hour weeks, the promotions I'd been passed over for while watching less qualified men leap past me, the ideas I'd presented that were ignored until a male colleague repeated them, the bonus I'd earned through blood and sweat, stolen at the last second by a CEO who'd never written a line of code in his life. Then maybe it should have valued what it had. After I hung up, I pulled out the USB drive I'd been carrying for 2 years. Harold's final gift, delivered by his lawyer after the funeral. It contained one file, a video message from Harold himself, recorded a week before his death. I'd watched it dozens of times, but tonight felt different. His face filled the screen, gaunt, but eyes still sharp. Natalie, if you're watching this, it means some idiot has tried to screw you over. The clause in your contract isn't just protection, it's a weapon. Use it. You built Ironvale's future. Don't let anyone steal that from you. And remember, the best revenge isn't destroying your enemies. It's letting them destroy themselves while you hold the keys to their salvation. The invisible legacy wasn't just code and algorithms, it was power, waiting to be claimed. And in 41 hours, it would all be mine. Victor Langford was everything wrong with modern corporate America wrapped in a $10,000 suit. At 34, he'd already left a trail of failed startups across Silicon Valley. Each collapse carefully spun as a strategic exit or pivot to new opportunities. His LinkedIn profile read like a masterclass in bullshit. Visionary disruptor, thought leader, innovation catalyst. What it didn't mention were the 3 companies that had burned through $40 million in venture capital under his leadership, producing nothing but branded t-shirts and empty promises. I'd done my research the day his appointment was announced. His father, Mitchell Langford, sat on boards from Boston to Bangkok, a silver-haired puppet master who'd spent 30 years collecting favors like baseball cards. When Ironvale's board needed a new CEO after Harold's death, Mitchell had made some calls. Suddenly, his son Victor was the perfect candidate to lead a company he couldn't even understand. The tech press had eaten it up. Young blood brings fresh vision to Ironvale. The headlines screamed. Forbes ran a puff piece featuring Victor in his Tesla, talking about disrupting the disruption and thinking outside the conventional paradigm. I'd watched him give that interview from my desk, debugging a critical security patch at 11 p.m., while he posed for photographers at 3 in the afternoon. His first all-hands meeting had been a masterpiece of corporate theater. He'd stood on stage in jeans and a black turtleneck, because apparently that was the required uniform for tech CEOs, now presenting slides about synergy and scalability, while fundamentally misunderstanding our core technology. When someone asked about our quantum encryption protocols, he'd deflected with practiced ease. Let's take that offline and circle back with the technical team. Translation: I have no fucking idea what you're talking about. But the most telling moment had come during a board presentation I'd been forced to attend. Victor was explaining our security infrastructure to potential investors, reading from slides I'd created, pretending to understand concepts he couldn't even pronounce correctly. He'd called our asymmetric cryptography asymptomatic 3 times before I gently corrected him. The look he'd given me wasn't gratitude, it was pure venom. That was the moment I knew my days were numbered. Victor's leadership philosophy seemed to consist entirely of cost-cutting and ego-stroking. He'd fired the entire QA team, claiming automated testing made them redundant. Never mind that someone had to write and maintain those tests. He'd outsourced customer support to a call center in the Philippines that couldn't answer basic technical questions. He'd even tried to replace our enterprise servers with cloud solutions, not understanding that our defense contracts specifically prohibited off-site data storage. Each decision was presented as optimization or modernization, accompanied by slick presentations and motivational quotes he'd stolen from TED Talks. The board loved it. The investors loved it. The tech press called him a bold reformer. Meanwhile, those of us actually keeping the company running watched him systematically destroy 15 years of careful construction. His office renovations alone had cost more than my entire department's annual budget. Italian marble floors, a $16,000 desk, a coffee machine that required proprietary pods shipped from Switzerland. He'd installed a putting green where Harold's library used to be, replacing hundreds of technical manuals and programming guides with a toy for a man who spent more time on the golf course than in the office. The week before firing me, he'd brought in a consulting firm, kids fresh from business school who'd never written code but felt qualified to evaluate our technical operations. They'd shadowed me for 3 days, asking questions like, "Couldn't we just use WordPress for this?" while examining infrastructure that handled classified military data. Their final recommendation had probably sealed my fate. The highest-paid technical staff represented redundant overhead. But what really revealed Victor's character was how he'd handled Harold's legacy. Our founder had established a scholarship program for underprivileged kids interested in coding, funded from company profits. Victor had killed it in his second month, calling it misaligned with shareholder interests. The computer lab Harold had donated to the local high school, Victor tried to reclaim the equipment, only backing down when the local news caught wind of it. I'd watched him in meetings, the way he'd take credit for other people's ideas, especially women's. Sarah from marketing would suggest a strategy. He'd dismiss it, then present the exact same concept a week later as his own breakthrough. When our junior developers solved problems, Victor would CC himself on the solution emails, then forward them to the board as examples of his team's excellence under his guidance. His management style was intimidation masked as motivation. He'd schedule meetings at 6 a.m. to prove who was committed. He'd send emails at midnight demanding immediate responses. He once fired a developer for taking paternity leave, claiming it showed lack of dedication. The lawsuit had been settled quietly. Of course, Daddy's lawyers were good at making problems disappear. The stratagem deal was supposed to be Victor's coronation, his proof that he belonged in Harold's chair. He'd been strutting around the office for weeks, dropping hints about the game-changing acquisition he was orchestrating. The financial press was already writing about the young genius who'd landed the deal of the decade. He'd even hired a documentary crew to film the final negotiations, planning to showcase his business acumen at next year's TechCrunch Disrupt. What he didn't understand, what he was incapable of understanding, was that the deal existed because of the technology, not his MBA buzzwords. Stratagem wasn't paying $350 million for Victor's PowerPoints. They were paying for the security infrastructure I'd built, the integration framework I'd designed, the reputation for reliability I'd earned through 15 years of excellence. But men like Victor don't see the engineering. They see numbers on spreadsheets, logos on contracts, their own faces in tomorrow's headlines. They sit in boardrooms taking credit for victories won by people they'll never acknowledge, then discard those same people the moment they become inconvenient. As I sat in my home office, watching the timer count down to his destruction, I felt no guilt. Victor Langford wasn't sitting in the wrong chair. He was sitting in a chair that should never have been his. And in 37 hours, he'd learn what happened when you built your throne on someone else's foundation. The Stratagem Corp deal was the kind of acquisition that defined careers and destroyed companies in equal measure. $350 million for a controlling stake in Ironvale, with earnouts that could push it to $500 million. Victor had been salivating over it since his first day, seeing dollar signs in magazine covers, never bothering to understand the intricate technical requirements that made it possible. I pulled up the contract on my screen, all 400 pages of it. I'd been sent a copy 6 months ago when Stratagem's technical team had insisted on reviewing our architecture with the person who'd actually built it. Victor had been furious about being bypassed, but even he couldn't argue with their demands. Page 247, Section 18, Subsection 4A, the Key Personnel Continuity Clause. The acquiring party reserves the right to terminate this agreement without penalty should any of the following essential technical personnel be removed, replaced, or terminated during the integration period. Natalie Brooks, Senior Systems Architect. There was my name, legally binding, non-negotiable. Stratagem's lawyers had insisted on it after their technical audit. Their CTO, Marcus Washington, had told me personally. Natalie, I'm being frank here without you. This infrastructure is worthless to us. We need at least 18 months to complete the integration, and you're the only one who understands both systems well enough to make it work. The integration itself was a masterpiece of engineering complexity. Stratagem's data processing systems ran on completely different protocols than ours, speaking different languages, following different rules. I'd spent 4 months building a translation layer that could seamlessly convert between them, maintaining security clearances while enabling real-time data exchange. It was like building a bridge between 2 cliffs while blindfolded, except the cliffs kept moving and the bridge had to be invisible. The demo was scheduled for Friday at 2 p.m., less than 72 hours from my termination. Stratagem's entire board would fly in from New York, expecting to see their future acquisition perform flawlessly. They'd run stress tests, security audits, load balancing examinations. They'd push every system to its breaking point, looking for any weakness that might justify reducing their offer or walking away entirely. What Victor didn't know what he couldn't know because he'd never bothered to ask was that the demo environment required manual authentication from my development credentials every 12 hours. It was a security measure I'd implemented to prevent unauthorized access to the integration framework during testing. Without my authentication, the entire demo system would lock down, displaying nothing but an error message, critical security failure authentication required. I'd tried to transfer those credentials to Jennifer last month, seeing the writing on the wall, but Victor had blocked it. Too much risk giving multiple people that level of access, he'd said, not understanding that he was creating a single point of failure. Keep it limited to essential personnel only. Essential personnel. The irony was delicious. The financial implications went beyond just losing the acquisition. Ironvale had already spent $12 million preparing for the merger legal fees, consultant costs, infrastructure upgrades. The board had borrowed against the expected windfall, taking on debt to modernize facilities and expand operations. Without Stratagem's money, those bills would come due with nothing to pay them. Then there were the penalty clauses. If Ironvale failed to deliver the promised integration capabilities, they'd owe Stratagem $20 million in breach of contract damages. The company's value would crater overnight. Shareholders would revolt. The board would panic. And at the center of it all would be Victor Langford, the boy genius who'd destroyed a 15-year-old company in 6 months. My phone buzzed with another text from Jennifer. Legal is freaking out. Someone just read the key personnel clause. Victor's in emergency meetings. Good. Let him sweat. Let him finally understand that business isn't just about connections and presentations. It's about the people who actually build things, who solve problems, who create value from nothing but logic and electricity. I opened another document, the technical specifications Stratagem had provided for their systems. 2,000 pages of requirements, protocols, and security parameters. I'd memorized every line, understood every connection, mapped every data flow. In my home office, I had the only complete documentation of how it all fit together. The versions on Ironvale's servers were deliberately incomplete, not sabotage, just standard security compartmentalization that Harold had always insisted on. Never put all your eggs in one basket, he'd said, and never let them know where all the baskets are. The integration required 7 different authentication keys, each generated by algorithms I designed. 3 of those algorithms existed only in my personal development environment. Rebuilding them from scratch would require reverse engineering the entire security framework, a process that would take months if you knew what you were looking for, years if you didn't. But the real beauty was in the dependencies. Every system relied on every other system in a carefully orchestrated dance. Pull one thread, and the entire tapestry would unravel. The payment processing couldn't function without the security layer. The security layer couldn't initialize without the database protocols. The database protocols couldn't sync without the integration framework. And the integration framework couldn't run without my authentication. Stratagem had been explicit about their requirements. They wanted to see the full system operational, handling real-time transactions, managing live data, responding to actual threats. They weren't interested in PowerPoints or promises. They wanted proof that Iron Veil's technology could merge with theirs seamlessly, securely, and immediately. My laptop chimed with a calendar reminder. Stratagem demo 68 hours. I'd set it months ago, back when I'd believed I'd be standing in that conference room, walking them through my creation, showing them the digital architecture I'd built with my own hands. Now, I'd be watching from the sidelines as everything collapsed. The news was already starting to leak. A tech blogger had posted about turmoil at Iron Veil and key departures ahead of major acquisition. The stock market would react soon. Short sellers would circle like vultures. The financial press would demand answers, and Victor would stand at the podium, his fake confidence finally cracking, trying to explain how he'd snatched defeat from the jaws of victory. $350 million, all standing on a foundation that would crumble in 36 hours when my credentials expired and the demo environment locked down, all because a narcissistic fool thought he could save $115,000 by firing the person who'd built his empire. The billion-dollar deal wasn't just on the edge of a cliff, it was already falling. Victor just didn't know it yet. Silence has a weight to it, a density that fills rooms and crushes expectations. As I walked out of Iron Veil's glass doors with my pathetic cardboard box, I didn't argue, didn't slam doors, didn't make threats. I simply signed my name and left, letting Victor believe he'd won another corporate conquest. The silence was strategic, calculated to breed the most dangerous enemy of all overconfidence. Back in my car, I'd deliberately left behind a USB drive on my desk, not hidden, not concealed, just casually forgotten like a coffee mug or a pen. It was formatted, empty, containing nothing but partition tables and blank sectors. But to someone like Victor, who understood technology like a fish understands aviation, it would look like treasure. I knew he'd plug it in within minutes of my departure, desperate to claim whatever secrets I might have stored there. Jennifer texted me within an hour. He's waving around a USB, claiming he has everything we need. Says you tried to steal company property but forgot the evidence. Perfect. Let him think he'd outsmarted me. Let him parade that empty drive around like a trophy while the real authentication keys counted down to expiration in systems he didn't even know existed. My home office had been prepared for this moment for 2 years. 3 monitors displayed different segments of Iron Veil's architecture not hacked or stolen, but legitimately accessed through development portals I'd created and Harold had approved. The center screen showed a simple countdown timer: 47 hours, 13 minutes, 28 seconds, until the intellectual property transfer activated. I opened my laptop and began crafting 3 emails, each one scheduled to send automatically at 9:15 a.m. on Friday, precisely 3 hours before the Stratagem demo. I'd learned long ago that timing was everything in corporate warfare. Too early, and they'd have time to respond. Too late, and it wouldn't matter. 3 hours was the sweet spot, enough time for panic, not enough for solutions. The first email was addressed to Marcus Washington, Stratagem's CTO, with their legal department CC'd. Dear Mr. Washington, this communication serves as formal notification that all intellectual property rights for Iron Veil Technologies' security infrastructure have legally transferred to me as of 9 a.m. today, per the terms outlined in my original employment contract, documentation attached. As such, Iron Veil no longer possesses the legal authority to demonstrate, transfer, or utilize said technology in any acquisition or merger activities. Regards, Natalie Brooks. The second email went to Iron Veil's board of directors and legal team. Board members, please be advised that due to the company's failure to deliver contractually obligated compensation, all intellectual property developed during my tenure has reverted to my ownership per Section 8, Paragraph 4 of my employment agreement, executed by Harold Kane. This includes all systems currently being demonstrated to Stratagem Corp. Legal documentation attached. Natalie Brooks. The third email was for Victor himself, though the entire leadership team would be CC'd. Victor, you had 48 hours to reconsider. Time's up. Check your demo environment. Best of luck with the presentation. N.B. Each email had attachments: scanned contracts, legal precedents, timestamp logs showing exactly when each piece of code was created, and most importantly, Harold's notarized signature on the intellectual property clause, ironclad evidence that would stand up in any court. But the true beauty wasn't in the emails themselves, it was in what would happen when they landed. Marcus Washington was a technical genius who understood exactly what losing my IP meant. He'd immediately order his team to verify the integration framework's status. They'd find it locked, inaccessible, legally radioactive. The board would panic, calling emergency sessions with lawyers who'd confirm the validity of my contract. They'd discover that Harold, in his meticulous wisdom, had made the clause bulletproof tested in court, validated by precedent, impossible to challenge on short notice. And Victor, he'd run to the demo environment, trying to log in with credentials he didn't have, watching error messages cascade across screens while Stratagem's executives checked their watches in the conference room next door. I pulled up the integration logs, watching the authentication timer tick down. In 36 hours, the system would demand my biometric confirmation, a thumbprint, retinal scan, and voice pattern match. Without it, every connection would sever. Every protocol would halt. Every bridge between Ironvale and Stratagem would burn. The phone rang, a number I didn't recognize. "Ms. Brooks, this is David Stern from TechCrunch. We've heard rumors about your departure from Ironvale. Care to comment?" "No comment at this time," I said pleasantly. "Though you might want to have someone at the Stratagem demo on Friday. Could be newsworthy." I hung up before he could respond. The seeds were planted. The tech press would be watching, waiting for any sign of blood in the water. And when the demo failed, when the deal collapsed, they'd document every second of Victor's humiliation. My laptop showed another notification someone was trying to access my development credentials remotely. The attempts were clumsy, desperate. Probably some junior developer Victor had ordered to hack in and fix this. Each failed attempt generated a log entry. More evidence of unauthorized access attempts that would play beautifully in court if needed. I opened a new document and began typing my resignation letter, not the one I'd signed under duress, but the real one, the one I'd send to every major tech publication after the demo failed. After 15 years of building Ironvale Technologies' core infrastructure, I was terminated without cause 48 hours before receiving earned compensation. This decision was made unilaterally by CEO Victor Langford, who was apparently unaware of both my contractual protections and my essential role in the Stratagem acquisition. I wish Ironvale the best as they navigate the consequences of prioritizing short-term financial manipulation over long-term technical excellence. Short, professional, devastating, the kind of letter that would be quoted in business schools as an example of how not to manage technical talent. Outside my window, the sun was setting over the city, somewhere in Ironvale's gleaming tower. Victor was probably celebrating his victory, counting the money he'd saved, planning how he'd spin my departure to the press. He had no idea he was already falling, that the ground was rushing up to meet him, that in 47 hours his entire world would shatter against the reality of what he'd destroyed. I closed my laptop and poured myself a glass of wine, the good stuff, the bottle I'd been saving for a special occasion. The silence in my apartment was perfect, complete, the eye of a storm that would soon tear everything apart. Strategic silence, the most powerful weapon in my arsenal. And Victor was about to learn why. The 3 emails sat in my outbox like loaded weapons, their send times synchronized to 9:15 a.m. Friday morning. Each one was a precision strike designed to hit exactly where it would cause maximum damage. But these weren't just emails, they were legal documents, evidence trails, and corporate death sentences all rolled into digital envelopes. I'd spent Thursday evening refining them, adding layers of documentation that would make any legal challenge impossible. The first email to Marcus Washington included 37 attachments, original code repositories with timestamps, patent applications filed under my name, development logs showing solo authorship, and the crown jewel, a signed affidavit from Harold Kane, dated 6 months before his death, confirming that all security infrastructure was my sole intellectual creation. The second email to the board was even more surgical. I'd attached forensic audits of every major system, showing my digital fingerprints on 93% of the codebase. But the killer detail was the valuation report. From when Stratagem first approached Ironvale, They'd explicitly valued the security infrastructure at $280 million of the $350 million offer. My IP wasn't just part of the deal, it was the deal. For Victor's email, I'd taken a different approach. Simplicity. Just 3 attachments: the employment contract with the IP clause highlighted, a screenshot of the timer showing 0 hours remaining, and a single line of code, the master shutdown command that would execute the moment my credentials expired. He wouldn't understand the code, but his developers would. They'd know exactly what was coming. My phone buzzed constantly. Jennifer, other colleagues, even some board members trying to reach me through personal channels. I ignored them all. Let them wonder. Let them worry. The silence was part of the strategy. At 11:43 p.m. Thursday night, I made one final addition to each email. A simple postscript: all rights available for licensing, terms negotiable. It was a lifeline disguised as a taunt. After the emails landed and the demo crashed, after the stock tanked and the board revolted, they'd remember those 4 words. They'd realize I wasn't trying to destroy Ironvale. I was demonstrating what happened when you didn't value what you had. I pulled up my development environment one last time, checking the authentication protocols. The biometric scanner was active, waiting for my input. Without it, the entire system would lock at midnight Friday, 9 hours before my email sent, 15 hours before the demo. The cascade failure would be invisible at first, hidden in background processes and daemon threads, but by demo time, it would be catastrophic. The beauty was in the technical details Victor had never bothered to understand. The authentication wasn't just a password, it was a living system that required constant validation. Every 12 hours, it needed confirmation that I was still actively maintaining it. Skip 1 check, and warning flags appeared. Skip 2, and non-critical systems began shutting down. Skip 3, and the entire infrastructure would enter security lockdown, treating any access attempt as a potential breach. I'd built it this way to prevent exactly what Victor had tried to do: steal the technology without the technologist. Harold had approved it, even encouraged it. Make yourself indispensable, Natalie, not through politics or manipulation, but through excellence they can't replicate. My laptop chimed with an automated message from Ironvale's servers. Biometric authentication required in 12 hours. The final countdown had begun. I opened my personal development account and began documenting everything, not for legal purposes, but for history. Screenshots of every system, every protocol, every line of code that would stop working in 12 hours. This wasn't revenge. It was archaeology, preserving the remnants of what I'd built before it crumbled. At 3:17 a.m., I noticed something interesting in the server logs. Someone was attempting to clone the entire integration framework, copying terabytes of data to offshore servers. The digital signature was Victor's executive access. He was trying to steal the code before it locked down, but he didn't understand that the code was useless without the authentication keys, like stealing a car without the engine. I added a 4th email to my scheduled sends, this one to the FBI's Intellectual Property Theft Division. Subject line: attempted corporate espionage in progress. The attachment included real-time logs of Victor's illegal copying, complete with timestamps and his personal authorization codes. Even if he somehow survived Friday's disaster, he wouldn't survive federal investigation. The preparation was meticulous, surgical, perfect. Each email was a scalpel cut, designed to sever specific arteries at exactly the right moment. The timing would create a cascade. Marcus Washington would receive his at 9:15, immediately calling Victor to demand answers. The board would get theirs at 9:16. Just as Victor was trying to explain to Stratagem, Victor would receive his at 9:17, while surrounded by panicking executives and furious board members. But the masterpiece was the hidden 5th email, scheduled for 9:18, addressed to every major tech journalist who'd covered the Stratagem deal. Subject line: why the Ironvale Stratagem deal just died. 1 paragraph, brutal in its simplicity. Ironvale CEO Victor Langford terminated the architect of their entire security infrastructure 48 hours before a contractual bonus, triggering an intellectual property reversion clause. The company no longer owns the technology Stratagem is acquiring. Documentation available upon request. By 9:30 a.m., it would be trending on Twitter. By 10, CNBC would break into regular programming. By noon demo time, the conference room would be full of executives watching a disaster live stream to the entire financial world. I saved everything to multiple secure drives, encrypted with keys. Only I knew. Then I sat back in my chair, watching the timer tick down. 8 hours until the biometric check failed, 12 hours until the email sent, 15 hours until Victor's world ended. The USB I'd left on my desk was still pinging our servers. Victor's security team probably analyzing its empty sectors for hidden data. Let them search. Let them waste precious hours examining nothing while the real bombs ticked away in scheduled tasks and authentication timers. My wine glass was empty. I didn't refill it. This moment required clarity, not celebration. In the darkness of my home office, surrounded by the architecture I'd built and was about to reclaim, I felt something Harold would have appreciated: the perfect balance between justice and devastation. 3 emails, 15 hours, $350 million about to evaporate into the digital ether. And Victor Langford still had no idea what was coming. Friday morning arrived with the kind of crystalline clarity that precedes disasters. At 9:15 a.m., my emails deployed like synchronized explosives, each one finding its target with digital precision. I sat in my home office, monitoring the cascade through various feeds: Twitter, LinkedIn, Reddit's technology forums, and a trading app showing Ironvale's stock price in real time. The first domino fell at 9:17 a.m. Marcus Washington's direct line to Victor went straight to the executive conference room speaker I knew, because Jennifer was live texting me despite my silence. Marcus is screaming about IP theft. Victor's face just went white. He's stammering about a USB drive. 9:18 a.m. The journalist's emails landed. My phone exploded with calls from reporters I'd cultivated over the years. I declined them all, but watched as Twitter began lighting up. Breaking sources confirm Ironvale may not own its core technology ahead of Stratagem acquisition. 9:21 a.m. The first trading halt. Ironvale stock frozen as news spread. The financial networks picked it up immediately. CNBC's Chiron. Ironvale deal in jeopardy. Key personnel dispute. By 9:30 a.m., the story had evolved from rumor to confirmed catastrophe. Someone inside Ironvale, probably a board member in full panic mode, had leaked the key personnel clause to Bloomberg. The headline was brutal: Stratagem's $350 million acquisition, halted fired employee owns critical technology. I pulled up Ironvale's internal systems through my still-active development portal, watching the authentication failures cascade through the network. The demo environment was completely locked, displaying a single message: security protocol violation, biometric authentication required, access denied. The trading app showed Ironvale down 37% before the second halt kicked in. Short sellers were feasting on the corpse of Victor's ambitions. StockTwits was brutal. CEO thought he was saving $115K. Cost shareholders $350 instead. Harvard Business School adding new course: How to Destroy Your Company 101. At 10:45 a.m., the tech press found Victor's LinkedIn profile, where he'd been bragging about the deal just yesterday. Excited to announce we're entering final stages with Stratagem. This is what visionary leadership looks like. The comments section had turned into a digital pillory. Someone had even found his old Forbes interview and created a meme disrupting the disruption over a picture of a dumpster fire. Jennifer's texts painted a picture of pure chaos. Conference room looks like a war zone. Board member just threw a laptop. Victor tried to blame you for sabotage, but legal shut him down. Your contract is ironclad. Stratagem's people walked out 15 minutes ago. At 11:23 a.m., the news broke wide. TechCrunch's headline: The $115K revenge, how one firing killed Silicon Valley's deal of the year. They'd somehow gotten hold of the timeline: my firing, the 48-hour clause, the biometric authentication failure. The article was already trending #1 on Hacker News. The memes started flooding in. Someone had created a Hitler Reacts video with subtitles about Victor discovering the IP clause. Another showed the Titanic sinking with Victor's face photoshopped onto the captain. But the one that went truly viral was simple: a screenshot of my original employment contract with Harold's signature, captioned, "Always read the fine print." By noon, the exact time the demo should have been starting, Stratagem released an official statement. Due to material misrepresentation regarding intellectual property ownership, Stratagem Corp is terminating all acquisition discussions with Ironvale Technologies effective immediately. We are exploring potential legal remedies. Translation: we're going to sue you into oblivion. The financial blogs were having a field day calculating the damage. Market cap loss, $800 million. Potential lawsuits, $50 million minimum. Cost to rebuild the technology from scratch, 2 years and $40 million. If they could find someone capable. Cost of Victor's ego, everything. Reddit's Wall Street Bets had created a mega thread. Ironvale Lost Porn CEO literally can't stop losing. Someone had calculated that Victor's decision to fire me had cost approximately $3,000 per second since the market opened. At 12:37 p.m., my phone rang with a blocked number. I knew who it was before answering. Natalie. Victor's voice was broken, desperate. Please, we can work this out. The licensing terms are in my email. Victor? You don't understand. The board is... They're calling for my resignation. My father. Your father should have taught you to read contracts. How much do you want us to name a price? I looked at the timer on my screen. The IP transfer was complete, irreversible, legally mine. $350 million sounds about right. That's what you just cost your shareholders. That's insane. Be reasonable. I am being reasonable. You had 48 hours to be reasonable. You chose this. You planned this. You set me up. No, Victor. Harold set you up 2 years ago, when he knew someone like you might eventually sit in his chair. I just pulled the trigger you loaded. Silence. Then, quietly, they're going to destroy me. No, Victor, you destroyed yourself. I just made sure everyone could watch. I hung up. Within minutes. Jennifer texted. He just walked out. Security is boxing his office. Board named interim CEO effective immediately. The Twitter sentiment was shifting from mockery to awe. Someone had done the math. I destroyed $350 million in value with 3 emails totaling less than 500 words. Most expensive emails in history, one analyst tweeted. Weaponized competence, replied another. By 2 p.m., when the demo should have been concluding with champagne and handshakes, Ironvale's stock had lost 63% of its value. Victor's name was trending worldwide, not as the visionary CEO who'd closed the deal of the decade, but as the cautionary tale who'd burned it all for a bonus he'd never have to pay. The Bloomberg terminal showed the final tally market cap at Monday's close $1.8 billion. Market cap at Friday's close $672 million. Value destroyed $1.128 billion. And somewhere in that wreckage was Victor Langford's career, his reputation, his father's connections, all of it consumed in the inferno of his own arrogance. The dominoes hadn't just fallen, they'd exploded, each one triggering the next in a chain reaction that turned a corporate campus into a crater. And I hadn't even left my apartment. The call from Marcus Washington came at 4:23 p.m., after the markets had closed and the dust had begun to settle on the wreckage of Ironvale. Natalie, his voice carried respect, maybe even admiration. I have to admit, that was masterfully executed. I didn't execute anything. Marcus, I just let physics take its course. Remove a foundation. The building falls. He chuckled, a dry sound. Speaking of foundations, I have a proposition. Stratagem needs that integration framework. More importantly, we need the mind that built it. I'm listening. We're prepared to contract with you directly, your company, your terms. Initial contract of $70 million for the complete technology transfer and 18 months of integration support. Plus, we want you to build our next-generation security infrastructure. $70 million, not quite the $350 that Victor had lost, but enough to start my own firm. Hire my own team. Build my own empire. Send the contract to my lawyer. I'll review it this weekend. Natalie, what you did today, some people are calling it revenge. What do you call it? I looked at my laptop screen where the notification still glowed. Transfer complete. Intellectual property rights, Natalie Brooks. Justice, Marcus. I call it justice. After hanging up, I walked to my window, looking out at the city lights beginning to flicker on. Somewhere out there, Victor was probably in a bar, drowning his humiliation in expensive whiskey his father would no longer pay for. The board was probably an emergency session, trying to figure out how to rebuild technology they'd never bothered to understand. And Jennifer and my former colleagues were probably updating their resumes, knowing Ironvale's days were numbered. My phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. I almost deleted it, then noticed the attachment a photo. It was Harold, taken maybe a month before he died. Standing in front of the original Ironvale server room, he was holding a sign that said, "Building tomorrow's security today." Jennifer had found it in his old files and thought I should have it. I saved the photo, then opened my laptop to register my new company. The name came immediately. Kane Security Solutions. Harold would have appreciated that his name protecting the future, even after death. The incorporation papers were simple, the business plan already forming in my mind. I'd hire the best developers from Ironvale's ruins, the ones Victor had undervalued and overlooked. We'd build something better, something that no MBA with a trust fund could destroy on a whim. By midnight, I'd received 17 LinkedIn messages from former colleagues, 3 acquisition offers from competitors who'd watched the day's carnage, and 1 text from Victor's father. "You cost me significant money today, but my son cost himself everything. Perhaps he'll finally learn." I didn't reply. There was nothing to say. Monday morning's Wall Street Journal ran a feature, "The Engineer's Revenge: How Intellectual Property Became the Ultimate Weapon." They'd interviewed dozens of executives, all suddenly very interested in reviewing their employment contracts, especially the fine print about IP rights. One CEO admitted he'd spent the weekend auditing every technical employee's agreement. The Natalie Brooks incident, as they were calling it, had become a watershed moment in Silicon Valley. But the real victory came in a different form. Tuesday afternoon, a package arrived, no return address, just a local postmark. Inside was a bottle of 25-year-old Macallan and a note in shaky handwriting. "Harold always said you'd know when to open this. I think that time is now. Margaret Kane." Harold's widow had been watching. She knew. They all knew. I opened the bottle that evening, pouring 2 glasses, one for me, one placed next to Harold's photo. The whiskey burned smooth, tasting of patience and vindication. In the silence of my apartment, I could almost hear Harold's voice. "Never let them own your mind, Natalie." 3 emails, $350 million, 1 CEO's career destroyed. All because Victor Langford thought he could steal $115,000 from the wrong engineer. I raised my glass to Harold's photo. The foundation held, old friend, just like you knew it would. Outside my window, the city sprawled endless and electric, full of companies built on code and genius, held together by people like me who worked in silence and shadow, while men like Victor took the credit. But today, for once, the shadows had won. Today, competence had defeated confidence. Engineering had triumphed over ego. My laptop chimed with another notification, 3 more companies wanting to discuss contracts with Kane Security Solutions. I smiled. That same cold smile I'd worn walking out of Ironvale with my cardboard box. This wasn't the end of the story. It was the beginning. Victor thought he'd fired an employee. Instead, he'd created a competitor. And unlike him, I knew how to read the fine print. The revenge was complete. The future was just starting. No champagne, no celebration, just the quiet satisfaction of a job well done, a foundation properly laid, and the knowledge that somewhere in this city, every CEO was double-checking their employment contracts, suddenly very aware of the engineers they'd taken for granted. I closed my laptop and finished the whiskey. Tomorrow, I'd build something new. Tonight, I'd savor the perfect silence of victory. Thank you for listening to this story of corporate justice. I'd love to know where you're tuning in from. Drop a comment below and let's connect. If this tale of revenge resonated with you, please subscribe to the channel and share your thoughts. Have you ever witnessed karma in the workplace? Let's discuss in the comments.